day at how many people have come out tonight. Thank you all so much. We're so happy to see you, so happy you're here. I don't usually get nervous at these things, but I'm a little nervous for some reason, so y'all bear with me, okay? In the summer of 1972, the Apollo space program was winding down. After successfully landing 10 men on the moon and returning them safely to Earth, only one final mission, Apollo 17, remained. To a 10-year-old boy living in a small town in eastern Kentucky, nothing could have been more exciting than following along during the glory days of the American manned space program. As soon as school dismissed for the summer, my two best friends and I began laying our plans. My family had moved to Campton when my parents bought a restaurant, which included an attached apartment in the back. Next door was a furniture store owned by Kenny's parents, and Charlie's family lived on a nearby street. It was in a big field behind the Baptist church where the three of us discovered one another. All we ever called it back then was the field. It was where we played football in the winter, baseball and wiffle ball in the spring and summer, and basketball in the fall. There we played and fought and camped out and caught crawdads along the muddy Swift's Camp Creek that ran behind the field. There we dreamed and schemed. There we did things we weren't supposed to do, things like playing with fireworks. What is it about blowing things up that brings such a thrill to the hearts of boys? We blew up model cars, army soldiers, action figures. Pretty much anything we could get our hands on was subject to arbitrary and capricious acts of demolition. One of Charlie's favorite uses of them was blowing apart plastic football players from his electric football game. It had to be done, y'all. They were underperforming. Lots of things were on our minds that summer. Baseball cards, wiffle ball, camping out, and playing Monopoly and Rook on rainy days. But foremost in our minds that summer were fireworks and the Apollo moon landings. Let's just say the fireworks fizzled. When my dad found out that we had managed to get our hands on several bricks of firecrackers and bottle rockets, he put the kibosh on my participation. And after a couple of phone calls, my friends' parents did the same. Now, Charlie is the one who actually had possession of the illicit ordnance. His dad had secured them away in the smokehouse, a country word for an outbuilding that may once in generations past have been used for the actual smoking of meat. By then, it was mostly a place to store everything from Christmas decorations to lawn and garden equipment. As we rummaged through the contents of Charlie's smokehouse, Kenny made a momentous discovery: several small bags of what appeared to be gunpowder. "Hey, Charlie," Kenny exclaimed, "is this what I think it is?" "Yeah," Charlie said matter-of-factly. "My dad uses it to reload hunting cartridges." We all looked at each other. Firecrackers are child's play when you have access to pounds of pure powder. "Hey," Kenny said, "I know what we can do. We can build the world's biggest bottle rocket." "Or," I offered, "we could build a real rocket and we could all go to the moon just like those NASA astronauts." We all laughed. Only I wasn't laughing quite as hard as Kenny and Charlie. Okay, I may have misled you all a little bit about who I was at 10 years old. Oh, I really did enjoy the ball games and campouts and sleepovers and fireworks and all the rest. But I was also a bit of a loner at times. Actually, I was most comfortable by myself with a good book. I spent a great deal of time at the Wolfe County Public Library, where Mrs. Adams or Mrs. Brewer would help me find books about things that interested me. I liked the Hardy Boys and a lesser-known series of the same genre, known as Alfred Hitchcock and the Three Investigators. I'm not sure what Alfred Hitchcock had to do with the books. I think he wrote an introduction to each one, or maybe someone using his name did so. It was really about the three boys, about our ages, who investigated all sorts of crimes and alleged supernatural occurrences. I sometimes pictured those boys as me and Kenny and Charlie. One was a jock, that would be Charlie. One was just a normal kid, sort of the common sense one. No, that wasn't me. That would be Kenny. One of them was the brainiac, who I envisioned as me. I also loved books about science, about history, and especially about anything related to outer space, from astronomy to space exploration to stories of ancient aliens. I was up for any of it. But I was absolutely spellbound by what was happening then and there, the Apollo moon missions. I have a vivid memory of staying up late the night of July 20th, 1969, to watch Neil Armstrong take those iconic first steps on the moon. I still get chill bumps just thinking about it. I was watching with my dad on a tiny black and white TV with poor sound when Neil said those famous words. I couldn't quite make them out. What did he say? I asked my dad. I'm not sure. Something about a small step and a giant leech, I think. But be sure to read about it in the paper tomorrow. In 10 years, school kids will be memorizing those words. My dad was a brilliant man. Now, it was against this backdrop that I went home the night of the smokehouse meeting and laid in bed for hours contemplating what I had said in the smokehouse. Now look, I was a kid of 10 and I was admittedly a science geek and a dreamer. But even in my wildest dreams, I didn't really think we were going to build a rocket to the moon. Why, NASA probably spent more money than my parents made in a whole year to build those rockets. And even if I saved my $2 a week allowance till I was in college, I still couldn't build a moon rocket. But what if we could build one that would at least carry one of us up just above the clouds, like our bottle rockets, high enough to look down and see all of Campton, heck, maybe all of Wolf County. So the next day, I got up early and got myself down to the library. In those pre-internet days, the library was the best place to seek knowledge. Spoiler alert, it still is. Anyway, I left there with an armful of books about rocket science. And later that day, we had the first meeting of the official Rocket Boys Club, with Kenny presiding. I think it went something like this. Kenny, guys, can we really do this? Me, I think we can. Charlie, I'm late for supper. We had many more meetings in the ensuing weeks. I'll spare you the boring details. It all came down to this. I had read that you could mix gunpowder with sugar to make a solid rocket fuel. Yeah, I know. Stay with me. So I could repurpose an old water heater we'd found at the junkyard for the engine. We just had to find something for the payload compartment. Payload, that would be us. Now at this point, I think I know what you all are thinking. Even at 10 years of age, surely you boys didn't really think you were going to go up in a water heater full of gunpowder and sugar and fly above the clouds? And even if you could manage that, how would you get back down safely? Was there any room in your minds for doubt that you could really pull this off? And most importantly, where were your parents? Look, there's only one thing I know for sure about most of you folks. If you're an adult, or even if you're a teenager, at one time in your life, you've been 10 years old. Do you remember? At 10 years old, literally anything is possible. Also, at 10 years old, our minds have this extraordinary capacity to entertain absurd ideas that we would never, if we were being completely honest, we'd never admit that. But we don't do that. At 10 years old, we still believe in magic. Sometimes I think adults could learn a thing or two from 10-year-olds. So all during that summer, as we were working on that old water heater, drawing up plans for our rocket, I know that deep down inside, none of us really thought we would ever launch that thing. But that's how you play make-believe at 10 years old. You never admit that it's make-believe. You just keep the fantasy alive. You breathe new life into it every day. It consumes your waking hours, your sleepless nights, and your dreams. You become the fantasy. Needless to say, the Rocket Boys never left terra firma that summer. But we never admitted defeat, never pointed fingers and said, "I told you so." We went back to school in the fall, and we moved on to touch football and bonfires and jumping in piles of leaves. And something we were only starting to notice for the first time: girls. Nobody ever spoke of the moon rocket again, but for one incredible summer, we were the Rocket Boys of Campton. And what a magical summer it was. Thank you.